Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. So serious. Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 533 of the InSession Film Podcast. I'm Ryan McQuaid.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, we did it. We got it right. A little bit behind the scenes. We fumbled the ball a little bit to start off this show. But we're here. We're here to
Some of
talk
us forgot our own names. We'll simply say that for those of you listening.
I'm not going to say who did it, but it wasn't me. So let's just
But we're
say
here. We're here. Episode 533. We're here to go.
You know what, Brendan? I'm glad you're here because
Me too.
we're the only ones that care this week to talk on the main
Oh,
show.
God.
Because
Don't be hard on Jay and JD here. The
I
two
mean, everybody
J's
wants
of
to go on
InSession
vacation.
Film.
Must be nice. You know, everybody
be
just
nice.
goes. You know, they go sailing. Takes me away. You know what I mean? Little Christopher Cross. Just getting away.
Now, all of a sudden, I'm thinking about that scene between Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Bay's Ambulance and how they sang that song in that film.
We can sing it at the end of the episode. That's for
We're
sure.
not doing
But,
that. We're not doing that.
We are not here with JD and Jay. We were all together last week for the
I think we scared them off.
yeah,
after
for the
that conversation.
the Disney rankings. Yeah, I think JD's off watching Fantasia and Jay's off watching Sleeping Beauty. They don't have time for this.
They don't have time for
this
Marvel
show.
right now.
No, they're not going to talk about the MCU. That is what you and I are here to discuss.
Yeah.
We're here to discuss kind of just the state of everything. It's not a big, parliamentary procedure or anything that we're going to be doing here tonight. It's more going to be like a loose conversation about how we feel about the MCU right now, because it's very top of mind. We've got a little bit of box office predictions at this time of what Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 might be coming this weekend. So I think that might give us a little bit of an indication into our answers here, right, Brendan?
It might. There was some talk about what it was projected to make this opening weekend specifically, not the full weekend, but its opening weekend specifically, and what it actually made. And I guess just to get the news right out the gate, according to people out there and how they actually crunch their numbers, it's underperforming slightly, is what we're hearing. And maybe there'll be talk about that.
It's underperforming like $30 to $40 million less than what is expected domestically. Worldwide, I think it's still going to make a $250 million on its worldwide stuff. So worldwide,
it's so different everywhere else.
Yeah, internationally, it's going to be fine.
But
here, it I will say it doesn't have really anything coming out next weekend. So people, maybe the word of mouth, maybe it carries over a little bit. Maybe there's not far drop.
The timing of its release might be its best friend going forward,
because it's such a busy summer. In 2 weeks is Fastened.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm going to say it. I'm not going to call it Fast 10. I'm going to call it Fastened.
Not going to call it Fasix.
Nope, not going to do FaxX. I'm not going to call it that. No, because I literally got a press release. This is Inside Baseball, that they were like in parentheses, it's Fast 10. I'm like, oh, it's just Fastened. I'm just going to put it all together.
It's Fastened.
I'm just gonna say, it's Fastened. Fasten your seatbelt.
Fasten your seatbelts. That's what the whole movie
just
is.
Call it that anyway. Damn it. But we're
that's
talk
a missed
about
opportunity.
The MCU as a kind of a whole. Brendan and I are going to give our updated top 10 because they're 33 movies. Yeah, 33, 32.
We'll talk about this. 32 movies, if I'm not mistaken. But I think for the purposes of this conversation, Ryan, if you're okay with it, I think we should at least consider some of the Disney Plus properties as well.
Okay.
And spoiler alert, I'm not going to reveal it too directly, but in my top 10 right now is at least one of the Disney Plus shows. So I think it's worth talking about that. But if we were to consider all of that, including some of the one-off specials that they did, such as the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, or even Werewolf at Night, for instance, the Michael Giacchino directed film, I think it's like 42 entities to consider in this MCU ranking. It's pretty stacked. It's pretty stacked.
I'm on 38 actually. Yeah, I've seen Werewolf by Night. Why haven't I updated that? That's actually something that I should
It's
have
for.
on
I'm
here.
looking at my letterbox list right now. I think the actual number is 41. So we probably have a
41.
lot of listeners out there willing to fact check us on that. So I'm
Yeah,
saying it's 41, but we're willing to admit defeat if we're not quite right in this.
that is true. Brendan is willing to admit that on
I am willing
live
to. I'll take the
mic.
blame for this. I'll be the tall one here. I'll be the one that's willing to admit that.
Yes, you are. But no, I am. I'm trying to think of the two things that I don't have on here. Actually, I don't. I know one of them is She-Hulk. I never got around to that series. Do you
Okay.
have Do you have What If on your? Is that
You know what? I don't have What
Okay.
If on mine, and that's out of all of these MCU related properties, What If is the one I haven't really spent time investing in yet. And that's not a knock on the actual show itself. I just never took the time for it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Is the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special on there?
I have it on my list. Yeah.
Okay, then that's the thing I'm missing. That and She-Hulk. So
and to be fair, while I'm considering these, it might not be fair to, like think of this. The holiday special is what, a 45-minute literal special of sorts. It might not be fair to rank it alongside other full-length movies because it's a completely different narrative device, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I am considering it just, how much do I enjoy it within the ranks of the MCU in totality? And I think in that sense, it's kind of fair to include it.
Yeah, I have one television property.
Okay.
That's in my top 10. So
I'd be curious to hear what that is.
Yeah, I'm gonna just say this up front. It's Head and Shoulders the best one that they've done.
Okay.
Because and all the rest of them I don't really need. And get rid of them. That's gonna be some things that we talk about because we obviously are going to talk about these movies. We're going to talk about these television series, these specials, all these things that have been happening, especially in the last phase. And that's kind of the vibe that we're going to be getting. Obviously, some of the things that will be affected by a lot of what we talk about today will be the ramifications of the writer's strike or a DGA strike or a SAG strike or any strikes that will be happening potentially in Hollywood over the next couple of months. So that could delay things that are in development. I mean, we already seen them sort of shelve Blade upcoming. So when we talk about later in the episode, Brendan, are some of our expectations or things we're looking forward to or things we are hopeful will happen within the MCU. That's something that I think we can talk about as well. But I think, the best thing to jump in is to just jump in forward and sort of talk about the MCU the way we see it right now. And I think that this is a conversation we kind of loosely had the last time when Ant-Man Quantumanium had was one of the first episodes we did of the new podcast format here with all four of us. And it was a little bit of a fiery conversation between all four of us. I think we all have a little bit of a
there was some heat.
But I think with a couple months and time, and I think a little bit also too of now coming off the heels of a Guardians film that you like, you don't dislike.
I don't love, but again, I mean, I like it more than a lot of the other entities that came out during these past few phases. And when I say few phases, I really mean Phase 4 specifically. Because if I'm not mistaken, Guardians Volume 3 is kicking off Phase 5.
No, I think Ant-Man.
Okay, well then maybe Ant-Man was. I mean, I'm starting to get confused by the whole bookmarking of these phases.
Brendan, there was an idea. And I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Nick Fury.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Ant-Man Quantumanium, for somebody that makes a lot of jokes at the MCU's expense. I know way too much about it. That was the one that kicked off Phase 5, and this is the second. But also this movie that we talked about in a full-length review, which you can check out on our YouTube page, as well as also download here and listen to Did a good job of not spoiling that film as well too.
I think so.
Here,
Yeah.
on the InSession Film Podcast, Brendan and I had that conversation already, and about Guardians and how that movie was kind of delayed, and there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes with James Gunn and
Yeah.
everything, and there's a lot of mishmashing because of ramifications after Infinity War and Endgame, and that's kind of where we're at now. Where, this is. I talked about this on a space, and I think I kind of mentioned this in the review, Brendan, but I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is see, look at me already getting all confused.
You're considering the holiday special as Volume
like
3,
a lot
right?
of numbers going on. But no, I feel like it is still a part of what I'd like to call the MCU original Coke. Is that right? Is that all right to say? Like they're part of the original recipe?
Yeah, maybe.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
maybe.
still in like the first two phases. If you're part of the first two phases, which is when the Guardians were introduced,
Yeah.
then I think you're kind of still part of that original Infinity Saga property. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we have a lot of characters like Doctor Strange and Ant-Man that have had solo films. Thor's had a fourth film that came out last year. But we're beginning a lot of new Coke. All right. We've been getting some Shang-Chi's. I think Spider-Man's kind of borderline it, but they sort of.
Well, it depends on what they do with him. It could feel like new Coke for old Coke character.
Because they've kind of reset the timeline.
They basically treated the home trilogy, if you want to call it that, as an origin story, which in and of itself kind of an interesting task. I actually give them some credit for that one.
We'll talk about it. But I think that the best way to start this is just your overall feelings, Brendan, of where we're currently at post Volume 3, post James Gunn now leaving, post this movie's box office for the opening weekend, all these different post credits, all this different stuff. Where are you at right now with the MCU in your mindset and how you're viewing things?
Well, we sort of alluded to this, that at this point now, domestically speaking, there is talk that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is underperforming because it was projected to make, I think, $140 million at the U.S. box office.
150.
Yeah, and it ended up pulling around 110. Which, not a terrible number in the grand scheme of things, but given the projection and given the fact that it exists in a franchise like this that has a history of doing well at the box office, I could see why some financial critic pundits out there are calling this a point of concern. I see it. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say that yet. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say that there is superhero fatigue just yet. I get that there is, and I can speak for myself that I am hoping and looking for some excitement and some type of rejuvenation in the landscape of superhero movies specifically, right? There was a point where the MCU, at least with Phase 1 and Phase 2, and to an extent Phase 3 for the most part, where going to a Marvel movie felt like kind of an event. Even if you didn't love the movie, you felt like you were seeing something kind of special, right? And I feel like Disney kind of has a habit of doing this. We've seen it a lot with Star Wars now, where they realize the popularity of certain properties and they just churn out a lot of material that it almost like mistakenly becomes oversaturated a little bit. And I think the same thing is sort of happening with Marvel nowadays. And we have heard that apparently Kevin Feige is understanding of this. I think that there is this spoken attempt to maybe start pulling the reins back a little bit and, kind of understand what is working and what isn't. And this is not to consider, what's going on now with regard to the WGA strike, as you referred to, or anything related to Jonathan Majors. We haven't even alluded to that, but there might be some unfortunate circumstances that bleed into the overall plan of Phase 5 with the MCU that could force Kevin Feige and his team to slow things down a little bit. But I think creatively speaking, they're feeling that same thing regardless of these circumstances. And I do think that might be a decent choice. I'm not sure what the overall blame is. I think if I were to guess, I think it might be the overabundance of necessary Disney Plus properties that have to tie into everything. I think that's one of the biggest problems here. And to be perfectly honest, the majority of the Disney Plus properties haven't really hit all that well with me. I think they've had good episodes and good ideas here and there, but I don't know. I think the overall state of the MCU, what I would like to see going forward is a sense of excitement by surprising us more and I guess pulling the reins back a little bit from giving us content like every month. I don't think we need that. I think it needs to feel like an event again. And there was a point where it did. And I'm not saying this as a knock on Phase 4 in general, because Phase 4 was inconsistent. It was far and away the worst phase that we've seen from Marvel. And there was definitely a struggle to try and create an identity post-Endgame. But there were things from Phase 4 I really liked. Like there were some risks. There was a sense of experimentation to Phase 4 that I really did appreciate. It just didn't overall land as an overall phase that was meant to tell a complete, segmented story, right? And that's where I think Kevin Feige and his team need to kind of redefine what goes forward, if that makes sense. Kind of a long-winded answer, but that's where I'm feeling right now.
Whew, that's a lot. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I'm like the MCU right now.
You are the MCU right now.
Yeah, I feel like them. I feel confused. I think they are confused.
Okay. Yeah,
I think they don't know what they want to be. I know that JD is probably going to listen to this and get really upset and start, getting angry and thinking like, "Oh no, trust the process." I think the process was trusted and is done. I don't think they know what they're doing half the time because they keep delaying things, keep pushing things, they keep adding things, they keep doing these things. But this idea now of that you're having to trust an audience to go beyond what they already knew. And you told them that this event, this Infinity War, this Endgame, was the event of a generation.
And it was. It worked.
It was the culmination of 10 years of movies.
Yeah.
And it was the result of billions of dollars at the box office, consuming up the marketplace to the point in which you were the only thing in town people gave a crap about. That's just the truth. But what happens in many superhero movies, there's a rise and then there's a fall. And I think that Marvel is in something right now of a fall because of the fact of things that you are kind of saying. The proof is in the pudding because their last two movies this year, and I would even say to venture the movies last year, are a result of underperformance and not the stereotypical dominance that they once had. You look at Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The only reason that movie got a bump on its first weekend was because it was riding off the high of No Way Home being the only blockbuster in town on the holiday season. And it was one of the first films where theaters opened back up for people to see something because Dune had already kind of played out. And for whatever reason, people didn't go to West Side Story and a bunch of other things. It was really the only thing that fall or that winter season, right?
Right.
I remember Thor Love and Thunder not doing particularly as well as we all thought it would. And that's how something like Top Gun Maverick did so well. Like if you would have told me, well, it's either Thor or Doctor Strange is going to be the number one film of the box office from the summer. Surely it has to be that, right? Because that's what it has
Yeah.
been for the last 10 years. No, Top Gun Maverick beat it. Well, surely Black Panther Wakanda Forever will be pretty close to Avatar in terms of numbers. No, it got dominated by Avatar, a movie that's almost 40 minutes longer than Black Panther Wakanda Forever. That movie made this is Avatar, made
Yeah.
$2.2 billion as opposed to $700-800 million worldwide.
Yeah.
And I think a lot
those
of that
those are numbers that aren't worth scoffing at, but in comparison, maybe
in comparison
it
to
is.
the first film
Yeah.
that made $1 billion,
Well,
is a worldwide phenomenon.
But there is a conversation to be had about that too, with regard to these movies underperforming, but compared to what, right? Because let's say in the instance of something more recent like Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, right? Okay. That movie did not fare well compared to its Ant-Man counterparts, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But is that a fair comparison? Because
they're absolutely a fair comparison.
I don't think so. Because technically
no.
speaking, Quantumania should be more compared to whatever Marvel movie came right before it. It's more. I think.
Okay, then if you're going to compare it to Wakanda Forever, that made $800 million.
Well, then that's the thing. Yeah, I think we should be doing that more often, as opposed to saying, okay, if Thor: Love and Thunder was a failure at the box office, it shouldn't be because it's compared to Thor: Ragnarok. It should be because it's compared to whatever Marvel movie was before it. Because we sort of talked about this during our review of Guardians Volume 3, right? Is that this idea of trilogies within the MCU. There's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
No, like Captain America: Civil War is not a trilogy capper. That is, as much as I really like that movie, I know we might disagree on that movie, but I really like Civil War. That is not a trilogy capper for Captain America.
That's an Avengers movie.
That is another Avengers movie. I mean, granted, Captain America is a major presence in it, so it does feel of a piece with what came before with the Winter Soldiers specifically. Yeah. But it is not a trilogy capper.
Yeah, it's Avengers 2.5.
Yeah. So something like that, let's say if we're talking about the same financial exercise here, we can't say, like, let's say if Civil War pulled bad numbers because it was lower than Winter Soldier, that's a bullshit argument if you ask me. It's more to do what came right before it.
That's fair. I think though, obviously, some of that doesn't earlier Marvel. I don't think that really is that true.
Right. That's a different landscape and a different time.
I think you're right more now. And I think that's why people get kind of confused when they see this. But I think if you play that angle, Brendan, that kind of makes it worse.
And it might. Yeah.
Because you're talking about, okay, so we're talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp, right?
Yeah.
So that movie is coming off of the heels of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which made $859 million at the worldwide box office, which is, again, nothing to scoff at. But when you compare, obviously, Black Panther Wakanda Forever to Black Panther, right? Black Panther made $1.3 billion. Okay. And that's also with Chadwick Boseman, as opposed to not having Chadwick Boseman.
Does that make that movie a special case then? Because it was marketed differently. The absence of Chadwick Boseman. I mean, there's so many factors here.
I can't play shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I can only judge what has happened. Because
but I think shoulda, coulda, woulda sometimes plays into the numbers.
Would I love Chadwick Boseman to be alive? Yes.
Yeah.
Would I love also have them to recast the character? Yes.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how that movie was marketed because of the absence of Chadwick Boseman.
Well, yeah, because nobody wants to go to a funeral. Sorry.
But even so, regardless of taking away the circumstances, Wakanda Forever was always going to make more money than something like Quantumania. It was always going to be.
It is. But you can't have it both ways. Because you can't say one thing that we can compare it to the next, and then you're not. So how am I supposed to compare them? Because
I think the answer is that you don't. I don't know.
The answer is that you got to have something here to show, and you can't just pass on the buck of the fact that there is fatigue. The idea of that us saying that there was fatigue during the Infinity saga was anyone that said that was an idiot. Right now, there's a fatigue going on. And it's not even just a Marvel thing, I would argue, because you look at what happened with Shazam, Fury of the Gods, right? And even Black Adam to a certain extent. Those movies did not do as nearly as well. And I know they're totally different products.
Yep.
But they're still superhero movies nonetheless. And they did not do as financially successful as I think Warner Brothers would like. That's why they are planning to get rid of that, regardless of what Flash does, regardless of what Aquaman does. They are re-strategizing and refocusing, because the Batman, which is not connected to any of these universes, made more money than both of those movies. And it was because it was something fresh and different and inventive with a property that they've seen,
and better marketed too.
Way better market. It also came out in like March. Nothing was around it. Had like plenty of time to do it. Did really well. Also, have a good director. Have a really good actor. You know what I mean? There's no shot at The Rock and Zachary Levi, but Rob Pattinson is clearly a better actor than him. You know what I mean? And
certainly a more interesting one. Yeah, we'll say that.
I would say he's a better actor.
He is. Yeah. I'm trying to give credit where credit is due to people like The Rock or Dwayne Johnson and Zachary Levi, who are very good at their respective jobs, but it's a very different type of role that they're asked to contend with, as opposed to what Robert Pattinson was doing in the Batman.
I think Robert Pattinson could do Jumanji. I don't think The Rock could do The Lighthouse. That's the difference. But he could
put that on a bumper sticker.
Put it on a bumper sticker. There you go. But I think that where I'm at right now is the MCU itself. I think I said this a couple of months ago. I will keep saying it. They should have paused. They should have taken a breath. They should have had a victory lap. They had every right to have a victory lap. It is one of the MCU is one of the biggest gambles in studio history. It is, because because they had this idea, right? Even before probably Iron Man, they didn't want to tell us, but they had an idea. You don't put an end credit scene like that with Nick Fury at Iron Man's house if you don't think you've got some sort of plan that you want to have. And then you don't have all these phases and all these other different stuff if you don't have a plan and see how this is all guiding there. And the problem right now is since Endgame, you know, and JD's talked about this. We've lived in this post-blimp era. Audiences get really tired of seeing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
If it's in the same continuous story. That's why sometimes they get rid of a James Bond. That's why they get rid of, that's why there's even a little bit of a fatigue. And we talked about like Fastened, right? There is fatigue in that series because people are like, oh my God, they've had fatigue twice, early in the series and now right now. You know what I mean? And it takes rejuvenation. It takes new ideas. It takes creativity to do this. The Guardians of the Galaxy are Coca-Cola brand, legacy kind of characters. And when you look at them, you would think, I'm telling an audience it's the end of this Guardians iteration as a whole. It's the end of the director who brought them all together. And it's the movie that kicks off the summer season. You would think, Brendan, it would be like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where people would be like, it is? Okay, there's a sense of urgency to get to that theater.
Let me speak to that for a second, because I think what you're saying would absolutely drive people to the theater. But I got to say, I did not get that sense from the marketing at all.
No. Yeah. They didn't. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
But that's the truth.
That's the thing. Yeah. And that maybe
you're not
goes
telling an audience that.
Yeah. And
you've shepherded them to believe that this will be on Disney Plus in a couple months. And I can wait and not have to spend $50, $60, $70, $80. I went and saw a movie the other night with my wife. It was $30 for the two of us just to get into the building. Right, it was another $18 for a popcorn. I'm saying movies are expensive. If I miss a screening, honestly, it is kind of smarter to just wait $20 here and watch it and rent it here at the house than it would be to go to the theater. And I love going to the theater.
And
but
that
I'm just saying,
you're right. But that plays into the lack of eventizing, if there's a word for it, these occasions, right? So with regard to Guardians Volume 3, from a marketing standpoint, and when I look back at the trailers, the way it was publicized and stuff, I still only got the sense like, okay, like I was always looking forward to the movie. I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for just how I felt like the marketing was perceiving it to be. It kind of presented itself as if it's just another Guardians movie.
True.
And
That
that's where
case.
and that's maybe why I want to kind of get away from the whole like comparison game, like we were kind of arguing about a little bit, because sometimes the way a marketing strategy is put together is what says volumes, right? And the way that you're able to communicate to an audience pre-seeing the movie what you're getting into and why it's important is ultimately what matters sometimes. And maybe that's why something I don't know. I think there are a lot of factors here.
There were a lot of interviews with this cast for the last 2 weeks talking about on television, off television, before the strike, talking about this is the end.
I barely saw any of those, though. That's the other thing, is that those interviews might exist, but how well were they presented and pushed to us? Because I rarely saw any of them.
They're on late night. They're just like everything else.
I barely saw any of them.
They're everywhere. Trust me.
I did not see any of them.
The same thing. People saw the movie 2 weeks ago. The critics that are selective enough by Marvel every single go around.
But they do that for every Marvel movie. I mean,
that's what I'm saying, Brendan.
Yeah.
Is that if they do the same thing, they've done the same thing for every movie. They select the same people to get the same reactions, to get the same everything. Then it's like they're not doing anything different. You know what I mean?
And that's a marketing problem. That's a marketing problem.
That's a little bit of a marketing problem, but it's also like, I don't know, it's worked out for them before. And maybe they need to recalibrate. Maybe they need to take a break. The writer's strike is presenting them another golden opportunity to stop.
Well,
and just kind of think
and
everything. You know what I mean?
And let's look at Star Wars. Star Wars is kind of taking that break now. Kathleen Kennedy has sort of announced that from a cinematic movie-going standpoint, there will be more focus on other things as opposed to throwing more movies out there. Because there was that time where we sort of feared that Star Wars will fall victim to being less of the event that we liked experiencing it as.
Absolutely.
And to be fair, Star Wars actually does lend itself to more episodic kind of content, which is why I think the whole Disney Plus thing for Star Wars, regardless of how you feel about some of these series, that platform works for Star Wars, right? And it sort of saves them from, oversaturating the cinematic market. But maybe Marvel needs to do something kind of similar and not do both simultaneously.
Yeah, that was where they got murkied in the water, because it was where they instead of a victory lap, they doubled down. Like, you know what I mean? Like they won the jackpot with Endgame, right?
Yeah.
The highest grossing movie of all time, right? And you know what they said? You know what? Let's push all those chips on red again. And
let's just keep going. Let's just keep going.
No, that's not what you do. That's insanity to do that and not think that there would. And listen, let's not get it wrong. They've had a couple of, and they've still had really good hits, but to their standard, they set a standard for themselves. You know what I mean? It's like when you watch a basketball player, like LeBron James has a standard, Brendan.
Yeah.
So when LeBron has like a bad night and the Lakers, who he's playing for now, lose, it's not to the standard. So he's got to recalibrate, retool, and refocus in order to make sure that he's living up to the standard that not just he has put on himself, but everybody else has.
Sure.
And that's exactly what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has, and Kevin Feige especially has not done. That's
fair.
They have not looked at the fact that, I mean, Shang-Chi was almost direct to video, but yet that movie was a success in 2021, and yet that character now, like, we don't even have a sequel announced. We don't have any more iterations. We don't know where that's going. The Eternals, we've talked about this before. The ending of Eternal,
that giant hand sticking out of Earth.
Giant hand is sticking out in the middle of Earth somewhere. We don't know where that's all going, because some of that's supposed to tie into Blade, and now they've delayed Blade because of the writer's strike. Obviously, they've had issues with the script.
Yeah.
The Marvels got delayed because they needed to finish VFX. Obviously Wakanda Forever came out, but again, it was not nearly the success of the first film, which was a global phenomenon. And yes, if some people want to take it as a sequel or not, whatever you want to do, you know this as well as I do. The first iteration of something new, regardless if it's in the MCU or not, always does pretty well. And if it's a big hit, it does. But you know what does better? The sequel. The sequel always does better.
Well,
and it's been the case for every single sequel in the MCU except this one, because that one 1.3 to 850. And that's a little bit of a concern to look at. You know what I mean?
I think it's a fair concern. The thing where I'm kind of getting on both ends of the spectrum here is that maybe it's a marketing thing or the way that the MCU presents its overall strategy, because nowadays when I see a movie like Black Panther Wakanda Forever come out, I don't see that as a sequel to Black Panther. I see that as just a new MCU movie with the name Black Panther in it. That's all I see it as. I see these as that's why I argue that there's no such thing as a trilogy in the MCU, is that every new MCU movie is a new iteration in an entire single saga. And I think that narrative is what's starting to make its way into the forefront. So when, let's say a new Ant-Man movie comes out, Quantumania, people say, "Oh, it's the new Marvel movie," as opposed to the new Ant-Man movie. And I don't
know. I think people say both. I don't know. Disagree with that hypothesis, but fair.
But at the same time, if I am going to give some, I guess, benefit of the doubt to Kevin Feige and Marvel, one thing we haven't mentioned is how the pandemic maybe affected the overall trajectory of Phase 4. Which
I think of how they were going to schedule it out. I think they had to change things up.
And maybe there was, because something that Kevin Feige has proven, at least with Phases 1 through 3, is that he was pretty smart in how he chose to stagger these releases, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that a lack of a pandemic like we dealt with would have corrected this, but I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if the lack of COVID-19 would have maybe helped spread things out a little bit. And maybe there was this sense of trying to make up for lost time, which is where this sense of oversaturation came from, the overabundance of cinema and these Disney Plus properties that were all tying into one another. It almost felt like a game to keep up with it all. And maybe that was also part of it too.
But also too, you're asking audiences. It's one thing to ask an audience to go to 3 movies a year.
Yeah.
It's another thing to ask them, hey, I need 3 movies is 6 hours. Right, Brendan?
Yeah, give or take.
Let's say
close to 7, because you got to commute to the theater depending on where you are.
Well, I was talking about the runtime just itself. Let's say that they're closer to 8 hours, because there's 2.5 or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Actually, that's a fair
2:15, something like that, right? Okay. But I'm doing that sporadically throughout a 12-month calendar.
Yeah.
Okay. I then now have, like we talked about at the top when we were trying to figure out ranking, I have 3 or 4 other television shows. I have a werewolf special and I have a Christmas special. And mind you, not all that's going to connect. But then when we talked about in our Guardians review, I then have to be for a hot second think, wait, Mantis is related to Star-Lord and that's me. And I can get over that easily.
Yeah.
But not everybody can.
Not everyone can.
And not everybody's going to say, I'm going to spend $7, then $8, then it's $8 without commercials, but then it's $10 with commercials. Wait, how do I get rid of this? I don't want Disney Plus forever, this and this and that. It adds up. Every dollar is different, and everybody's financial situation is different.
Yep.
And it's not like myself, where I'm privileged enough to admit that I get all these screenings and I choose, or we go to screenings, or we get the screeners for these television shows ahead of time, because we're critics. We're in a very privileged space. True. But to understand the common man and woman, the common family
which is the majority of people seeing these things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After the pandemic, you have to give them a reason to come back to the theater. And if you're telling me that this thing is going to be on Disney Plus and I'm spending $10, it'll be on Disney Plus in 2 months, I will wait, because I rather spend $10 to wait and and I get tons of other content.
But it's and it's also this whole narrative too that it's like, oh, did you watch WandaVision? Did you watch Falcon and Winter Soldier? Did you watch Moon Knight? You might not understand it. And there has to be this line that I think needs to be drawn between what do we define? Not we. I when I say we, I mean Disney and Marvel Studios. What is defined as quote unquote necessary viewing? And I think there sometimes needs to be a distinction. And again, in some cases, I'm arguing for myself and what I want to see because I like the idea of separation that you can like you mentioned Werewolf by Night. Right now, there has been nothing in the cinematic or even Disney Plus landscape that is connected to Werewolf by Night. But that's kind of its charm, like the fact that it exists right now. It exists in its own vacuum. Maybe there'll be more that comes later.
Maybe Blade down the road.
Maybe
like
Blade. Maybe Blade.
Like that's what I was thinking when it was like opening up, like that sort of monster verse, and obviously that allows Blade to get in.
But even so, like it felt like it was contained, like it had its own individualized identity. And I think there needs to be more of that. Not everything needs to be like in many ways, WandaVision is Multiverse of Madness Part 1. I mean, it kind of is. And again, like I
retroactively,
like
I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I like both properties relatively well. But should they both be required viewing? Because like you said, you're asking audiences to go to the theater 3 times a year, and then you're also asking them to pay a monthly fee for Disney Plus and then watch 10 or 6 or whatever number episodes for like
those are 10-hour episodes,
3 or 4 shows a year. And they're all eventually tying into each other, and in many ways you kind of have to watch them in order. And that's the other thing too. It's like there's a schedule for these, and that's hard to keep up with.
Also, too, and this is just the broader streaming thing in general, Brendan, is we don't know what the hang on. Oh,
Bless you.
Sorry.
Bless you.
Oh no, it's Feige's.
I think you're allergic to the MCU now.
No, the thing is that, and this is with all with streaming, is what I was about to say, is that we don't know what the numbers are for these streaming shows. So we don't know if they've actually made a decent enough punch enough for it to, 1, consider that they need to exist, but then 2, enough for us to get over the crazy fandom, because this all was kind of mapped out beforehand by crazy fandom. And this is, again, what happens. The Snyderverse is a perfect example of this. And it's like Kevin Feige didn't look at that and realize how bad that was, because the MCU had television shows that were loosely connected to the MCU, and they were on Netflix. It was your Daredevils and your Jessica Jones and your Punishers, Luke Cage and Iron Fist. And then they had, their team up series, right? Okay.
Yeah.
That whole series, all those episodes, okay, they mentioned the stuff in the MCU, but they were contained within that universe. So kind of like what you're talking about with Werewolf, right there, Brendan?
Yeah.
A little bit. And and then what was the number one thing people wanted? The fans demanded. Why can't we have these characters fighting with the Avengers? It doesn't make any sense. So you listened to the fandom, and this is what happens when you listen to them, and then you don't follow what you were doing before. Because all
of a sudden you have a Rise of Skywalker on your hands.
You have a Snyder cut on your hands.
Yeah.
And the case in point, I think that is the bread and butter of what is the problem with general audiences. Brendan, when were we first introduced to Thanos?
That was the first Avengers in 2012.
When were we first into the next Thanos? Kang.
Well, that was Loki. That was the show called Loki.
Bingo. That's all you need to know about the priorities of where this series is at. You need to watch a television show to introduce your new Thanos, as opposed to seeing him on the big screen and wondering for 3 years, who the hell was that giant purple guy? And why does he matter? And he doesn't say a word, but his looming presence was felt throughout the entirety of it. And now I got to watch 8 episodes to get to 30 minutes of, well, like, I don't know, 20 minutes of him there. Then he, spoiler alert, the one version dies in Ant-Man. And I know this for a
Does
fact because,
he?
well, here's the thing. I know this for a fact. Okay.
Oh, for a
Because
fact. Okay.
because I have parents, all right, that are of a certain age. And I already have had to answer this question of, well, if he died in that one movie, how is he all these other things at the post credit? And who's actually the real bad guy?
Well,
And
I
I'm
mean,
like,
it's kind of underwhelming in that regard, I guess, is
it's
what you're saying.
very underwhelming.
Well, yeah, and normally I wouldn't, argue against what you're. I mean, normally I wouldn't argue in agreement with what you're saying. Actually, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I don't want to make a double negative out of this.
Yeah.
But in the case of, let's say, like the example you're using with regard to Kang, right?
Yeah.
Because normally I wouldn't mind being introduced to a bad guy like this that's meant to be the overarching villain for this saga in a show like that. In Loki, we were introduced to him. But the way that he was once again reintroduced as the villain for Quantumania, it mostly works only if you felt his presence in that prior show. And again, we're people that watched Loki, so we have that comparison. I don't know what it would have felt like if I were to separate my connectivity to Loki and experience him for the first time in Quantumania. Would it have been as thrilling or as interesting if I saw him for the first time in Quantumania? That's hard to say, but I'm kind of thinking, or at least hypothesizing, that I think it would have been rather underwhelming.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of, I guess, solidifies maybe the point that you're trying to say.
Well, also too, when were we first introduced to Loki?
Well, that was Thor. That was the first Thor movie.
And then when do we see him again?
We see him in the Avengers.
Because we've set up a villain and we've had him fight our heroes before, and we've given him a reason why he should be scorned, and we should understand what that reason is. And we actually wrote it out. We trusted our audience to watch that film, and then we trusted them to wait just 1 year. I'm not talking like 7 years. Just wait 1 year. 1 year. And you understand all the motives. And that's the other thing too, is that fans understood the motives. They understood that all you need to do is get these stones. If he gets these stones, we're screwed. So the Avengers has got to stop this giant purple guy from getting the stones, or the universe is done.
Right.
Well, they stopped him at the end of Endgame and fixed everything. Bing, bang, boom, end of story. You close the book, you put it on the shelf. Mom, I'm going to read something else. Oh, wait, no, there's more. There's more chapters. They're still writing it. Oh, okay. Well, I thought that was the end. Oh, it's not the end. Okay, then where's the starting point? What's the next story? Like, how do we build from there? Like, where does the new introduction? Like, where's the Iron Man to kick off for that? Right? You know what I mean? Like, where's the beginning of that? And it was Spider-Man. The second one with Tom Holland, and from that point, Brendan, yes, you have to deal with the blip, right? But I think the other thing is the audience, like I was saying earlier, I think the audience is tired of the blip, and it feels like you're seeing the same storyline over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's something that obviously gets, talked about, but then at a certain point it doesn't need to be, because the world's going to move on. New events are going to happen. New characters are going to be introduced. But the thing is that there's no Nick Fury. There's no Shield. There's no sense of we're supposed to have an Avengers movie in 2 years. There's no sense of this team, any of these characters being the Avengers. And that's the problem also too, is like, you're not making Avengers movies anymore. You're just making spinoffs.
Well,
and if you want to be that, that's fine. But
that is fine. And again, maybe something will happen within Phase 5. Maybe this next Avengers movie, which I believe is the Kang Dynasty, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Maybe something happens there where we realize, oh, an Avengers team up is happening sort of at forced will, right? Like they had no choice in the matter. Maybe these spin-offs of separate characters are forced to become a new Avengers because of Kang's ultimate goals. Again, I'm hypothesizing that maybe something will happen that we haven't seen yet that'll make us retroactively think, okay, I can kind of see why they paced it the way they did. It was a little difficult getting to that point, but now I kind of see the goal. And I just want to say I am willing to make that revelation and own up to that criticism if it gets to that. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's there yet, as we're talking about. And maybe it will. Maybe it will. I don't know.
Yeah. Because right now, this is phase 5.
Right.
Okay. It's Ant-Man Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, The Marvels, Captain America, New World Order, Thunderbolts, and Blade. And we talked about Blade being delayed. Right?
Yeah. Nice rhyme there. Blade being delayed.
Blade being delayed. The television shows, Secret Invasion, which is 6 episodes, 1 season. Loki, 6 episodes, season 2.
Yeah.
What If, which doesn't matter. Ironheart, Echo, Agatha, Coven of Chaos.
Oh yeah,
and the Daredevil show.
Yeah.
I don't know of those things announced there where any of that's going to connect, or any of those characters going to connect, if the whole thing's going to come together. And I think that's the problem, Brendan, is like, you've got the Guardians spread out now. You've got Shang-Chi kind of spread out. You've got Doctor Strange and Wanda spread out. You've got the Eternals, what's ever left of them, is spread out. You've got all these things that are spread out. You've got no leader,
which is not a bad thing. Yeah, I mean,
no, it's not. But it's also like, too, you've erased Spider-Man's memory.
Well, I mean, if you're not going to have a leader going forward, that's fine. But I think maybe there needs to be more of an emphasis on that narrative idea. You know, like that there is a lack of a leader, and how that lack of a leader is eventually going to be an important thing to find this leader going forward. And I feel like nowadays we're thinking of that idea as more of a criticism and bad storytelling.
I think it is a criticism because of the fact that they had clear leaders, and those 2 clear leaders then made up a movie where they fought against each other about the idea of what that group was supposed to be in Civil War. Like that's the epitome. It is the movie about a power struggle between the 2 supposed leaders of the Avengers. And now you have no leaders because you have not replaced, in the minds of audiences, essentially not even the star power or the characters, place the presence of Iron Man and Captain America. Replaced what Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans means for audience. It's like, say what you want. Audiences went to see them because they were the leaders. They were the faces of the franchise. There is no face of the franchise. I would argue, Brendan, the face of the franchise sadly passed away. And Marvel has not been able to replace him, because I think T'Challa was going to be one of those. And now that's the sad thing. I truly believe that, because Black Panther was such an important film to the Marvel Cinematic Universe beyond just, like awards about Oscars and stuff. It was a cultural, touchstone. It's one of those things you cannot, it is lightning in a bottle. You're not going to be able to capture that ever, or like again for some, or maybe you will, I don't know, but it's very hard to do that. It's very organic what happened with that movie. It hit the right time. And I think that, obviously you could make it Spider-Man and Tom Holland, but again, you erased his memory. So you're going to have to do a MacGuffin to figure out how to get that back, and it would also then kind of cheapen a little bit of the ending or the blank slate that they've kind of given the character going forward. And that's the kind of the thing too, that I hope that they don't do, is go back on some of the more interesting choices that they've done. But I'm afraid they have no choice, because they put themselves in this box.
Well, especially nowadays when they're still kind of introducing characters, right?
Well, I mean, like, I think that the ending of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 will be massively undercut by an Avengers film. That is a bold prediction of mine, because I do believe there will be a moment where we see all the original Guardians of the Galaxy back together again, running out of I don't know if it'll be a
We've inadvertently
or
just
something.
spoiled Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah.
Volume 3, I feel like. So we might have to get bleeped out at this point.
I don't know, but what I'm saying is that, well, I mean, it's about like the Guardians not being who they are anymore. I didn't say who or what, or if anyone died
Anyway,
or
yeah,
whatnot.
I get you. I get you.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, because the MCU are also, like you and I talked about, Brendan, they are built on moments where the audience, like, they literally leave audible pauses sometimes, for better or for worse, in their actually sometimes they're for good, because if you put a thing of dialogue in there too quickly, then you really can't hear it if you see it with a big crowd, because then everyone's cheering in the theaters and whatnot, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or they have, like, really, like you and I were talking about with Endgame before, in our, not in this discussion but another discussion, like Alvin Silvestri's score gets to like pick up and really carry
And fill those
forward the
blanks.
actions, and fill in those blanks. So I think that that's fine to do, but like, again, those things I think are going to happen, and with those things happening, it could ultimately, in my opinion, cheapen a lot of the things that they've tried to do to kind of single everything out.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're wrong in that. And I'd be curious to see where it
hope
goes.
not.
Well, yeah, and I'd be curious to see where it goes, because, like I said, in conjunction with what you're saying, I feel like we're still being introduced to new characters this late into not just Phase 4, but now into Phase 5. And a lot of that might be because of the overabundance of Disney, but Disney Plus properties, and how that's all correlating together. So I don't know. I'm hoping for the best. I really am.
Brendan, are you thirsty? You look a little tired. Has it been a long day for you, buddy?
It's been a long day. I need some coffee.
Man, coffee. Do I need coffee? You know, the way Tom, have you ever seen that video with Tom Holland and Tom Hanks, where Tom Hanks is giving Tom Holland a little bit of acting lesson?
I don't know if I have. I may have.
It's on the Graham Norton show, and he's trying to give him a line, and the line is, "Coffee, boy, do I need coffee." And I think that right now, boy, Brendan, do you need some coffee? And that coffee is from Coffee Cult.
That is good. That is good tasting coffee, and there are some great flavors there. I recently just got my batch not too long ago. The Sumatra it was, and it was tasty. And the thing about Coffee Cult is that they source only specialty grade Arabica coffee beans from over 50 countries around the world. They inspect each bean and only select the highest grade there. So the result is the best quality of coffee that you can get. It's unmatched. So for those of you out there that not only like coffee, but actually like the taste and the art of the creation of coffee, this is where to go. And other great things about Coffee Cult, Ryan, I'm not sure if you knew about this, but they source coffee from farms that actually pay their workers very well, especially women, fairly and equally. And they roast to order, which means you're not receiving stale coffee. You're not buying those products from drugstore shelves or pharmacies or grocery stores or anything like that that's been sitting for days or weeks at a time. It's extremely fresh and guaranteed to be extremely fresh. So this is great stuff. Coffeecult.com is where to go, and that's Coffee Cult with a K, coffeecult.com. You can get 15% off by using the code ISF. The InSession Film Podcast is brought to you by our friends over at First Time Watchers. And Ryan, we are in the middle of talking about the MCU, having some heated debates here, eventually going to be getting into our ranking of the MCU. And speaking of heated debates, sometimes a pretty heavy topic when it comes to the First Time Watchers podcast, but there's always something insightful that they have to say, regardless of the heated disagreements that they may have.
Yeah, those crazy Guardians of the Galaxies over there at First Time Watchers. So sorry.
Yeah.
Man, they're a bunch of
Guardians. They are.
They're a bunch of rocket raccoons and Drax the Destroyers over there. That's what they are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they are Groot indeed. They are great supporters of our shows and a podcast you should check out, hosted by Tim Walter and Hermano. And man, you think we know our movies, Brendan? They definitely know their movies.
They know their movies very well. And on their latest episode, there's always some element of surprise with what movie they're going to talk about on their latest episode. A lot of times it's some obscure film from the 80s, but in this case, they're talking about the animated film Persepolis, which is a very good movie. And they were also joined by our good friend Mark Herney from Criterion Cast to talk about that one. even further. And they had a great conversation on that one, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, and that's what's so unique about their show, and what I love about them is every week they pick a movie that neither of them have seen yet, and it could be old, new, something on their list of shame. Brendan and I and Jay have talked about doing like a list about our list of shames, and really just throwing those out there, and then we'll have to like cross those off. But they cross stuff off their list of shame. They review it with a modern lens and a fresh perspective, which makes their show so special. And they had some quick thoughts also on trailers that they've seen and some other films that they've brought up that are worth noting,
as well as some movie recommendations that they'll give as a special bonus at the end of each episode. Every show they do is very smart. It's sometimes kind of divisive, but they're certainly their own respective guardians of movie knowledge. They have a lot of great things to say about that. So Ryan, where can you find these guys online?
Well, you can check them out at firsttimewatchers.podbean.com, or you can also hit them up on Twitter at firsttimewatchers, or on Facebook by just searching First Time Watchers.
And also subscribe to them on iTunes or Apple Podcasts and leave them a review. Let them know that we sent you to them. And I guess to let them know that we sent you to them, let's ask that you use a little hashtag so that way that they know it was from us. And this week, given the Marvel / Guardians topic that we're in the middle of right now, hashtag Guardian Tim. Let's go with that.
Yeah, why not?
I'm selecting Tim here because he's the one that has the most final say as to whether First Time Watchers will continue or not. Because
there you go.
We always allude to this. First Time Watchers will be ending at episode 500. They only have a few more to go, and it's absolutely devastating, which means you need to check them out. So hopefully Tim will be the guardian of this show going forward. So that way they'll know that we sent you to them. The show is really great. We promise it's worth your time. Again, that's First Time Watchers.
Hey everybody, just want to take a second here to talk about Livestream for the Cure. This is an event that has been taking place since 2017, and it is dedicated to raising money for the Cancer Research Institute. It's a really incredible cause that I've gotten to be a part of a couple of times. And I'm going to get the honor and the opportunity to join them on the live stream again this year. I'll have more details for that when they become available, but wanted to get this on everyone's radar. It's going to take place May 18th, 19th, and 20th. This is an event where they live stream content over the course of 3 days with various podcasters, and we raise money. And this year, the goal is to get to $25,000, a goal that we are going to hit. Again, you can find all of the information at livestreamforthecure.com, or you can simply click on this QR code right over here and you can donate there directly. So be sure to join us. Again, that's May 18th, 19th, and 20th. And you can go to livestreamforthecure.com for more information.
Ryan, we've been talking for almost an hour on just this topic. I think at the very least, just to continue this conversation and get to something different, should we shift gears and talk about what we love about this MCU franchise thus far and talk about maybe our updated rankings? Because I think the more we talk about this, we're not going to come to a conclusion. We don't know what the conclusion is.
I know what it is. The conclusion will be, well, honestly, Brendan, I think I know exactly the remedy to fix all this.
All right.
And it's not to have it's to take new Coke off the menu, right? But bring back a Coca-Cola flavor that general audiences know and trust.
And is that, now let me just be clear, is that what you want to see, or is that what you think they're going to do?
I think that's what they're going to do, and honestly, I would be interested in seeing what they do with it.
And you mean like old Coke being someone like Steve Rogers or
nope. I'm not
Tony
talking
Stark.
about. I'm not talking about those two characters. Those two characters are dead or in a retirement home pooping.
Yeah, because the last thing I want to see is them come back. I do not want to
see
them come
Robert
back.
Downey Jr. and I do not want to see Chris Evans.
Chris Evans.
Chris Evans is in a retirement home eating tapioca pudding, and
With
Robert
Peggy
Downey
Carter.
Jr. is dead. All right,
Yeah.
so I am talking about what is the films that follow the new Avengers films. I am talking about giving the audience a actual good MCU trusted version of a property that really has Kevin Feige's always wanted to do, and he never really got a chance to fully do it the way he wants to, and that is Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four gives the problem of fixing this really, or it makes it very, very clear. Because one, Fantastic Four is one of the original Coke brand products and a big product in the comic books themselves. But on
from a cinematic landscape, it's probably the worst tasting Coke products.
Probably the worst one because of the fact that they've tried to do it many times.
Which means Marvel now has something to prove, right?
Exactly. They have something to prove. They don't have anything to prove with any of these new movies coming out. None of them. Like the fact that like they're going to make a Blade movie, and I can't wait to see it because I'm so in the bag for Mahershala as Blade. I'm like, yes, that is every day that they announce something bad with that movie, my heart sinks because that's like really the only thing I care about at this point for them.
Yeah, it's
because
unfortunate what they're going through with that one. Because I'm very interested in that one.
But that movie needs to be rated R, obviously. But the thing about it is that it would bring back the sort of the original 2008 sort of attitude that Kevin Feige had with Iron Man and what they had to prove, which is that we can get an audience to buy into a B plus-ish comic book character by a troubled actor. This, on the other hand, we can get an audience to trust under our brand one of the most important comic book families ever. And we just got rid of a family, so we need to bring in another family. Then the other thing is, and they tease this on a television show, which is stupid to tease it on a television show, regardless if I think the television
you're talking about the X-Men, right? The mutants.
I am talking about the X-Men. They teased it, mutants with Miss Marvel. And
I hated the way it was teased there. It completely undid what made her powers so interesting.
I don't think the television show's a bad television show.
No, I kind of like it. I actually think it's pretty good.
I hated that reveal. I really did hate that.
I'm with you on that.
But I think that that's another thing too, is allowing them to dive into that stuff, blend it all in, so then you can have it all really connect, and you could really then bring it all together, and you have these characters that audiences know, but can trust that Marvel can take the right steps to give us good iterations of it.
Yeah.
And then you are also able to do, those would be like safe properties, right? They would be sort of like safe things for them to do, because like, I don't expect Marvel to screw up a Fantastic Four or actually to probably do a better job at X-Men than like the last couple of X-Men movies were, you know what I mean? But, what was it? New Mutants and the films post Days of Future Past were awful. So I think that they then, because with original brands like, or just safer choices, because Thor is a little bit of it's not as much of a safe choice, but First Avenger is, because it's a period piece, you know what I mean? And it's just Captain America, or a Hulk movie is kind of a safe choice, because we've seen that before, but it was done under their brand, and whether you liked it or not, it's still safe. Iron Man movies, very safe stuff to do. Okay. The risky things then become, okay, let's bring them all together. Or better yet, as we do sequels to both Captain America and to Iron Man, and have the third film and the second film, let's also introduce a family where it's got a talking raccoon in it and a tree thing that only says, I am Groot. And then that's when you're able to go weird and expand it. So they got to go small in order to go big, kind of the thing. You know what I mean? And it's big to small. Go back to roots. It's okay to do that, because right now everything's so scattered. It feels so big, Brendan, that like to bring it back in a little bit, it's okay to do that. Like make it a little bit like this here for a minute, because you need to have all these things together. Because I think that if you have a movie like Kang Dynasty and you spread it all out and you have all these characters everywhere and they're fighting a different version of Kang in every single thing and whatnot, that's not an Avengers movie. You know what I mean? Like that's just,
well, I don't know yet. Yeah.
That's kind of, I don't even know what that would be. Like, you know what I mean? That would just, because at that point, if they're all scattered and fighting an individual version of Kane, they've never actually been the Avengers. You need like a movie to set them up as the Avengers.
Well, maybe that is
No?
the movie to set them up as the Avengers, because we are getting 2 Avengers movies, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
Secret War? What is it?
Ye-
Avengers?
Secret Wars is the second in this
Yeah.
string of Avengers movies that we're getting. The first one
lot of
being the
secrets.
Kang Dynasty.
You got an Secret Invasion, Secret Wars. God, I'm keeping a lot
There's
of
a lot of
secrets over
secrets.
there.
There's a lot of secrets happening
Yeah.
here. I am interested to see what happens with Fantastic Four. I don't want to spend too much time on this topic because I know we have to get to our
Yeah, I know we gotta
updated
go,
top
but-
10s. But I will say this: there is, as we're recording this, a lot of rumors, speculation, potential confirmations as far as who is playing who in Fantastic Four. And I don't know if this is a marketing ploy from Marvel to try and get us talking about who's playing who. I think they're doing a pretty darn good job, at least in that sense. But if the rumors are true that Adam Driver is the one playing Reed Richards, okay, he'll do a good job. He'll do a good job, sure.
He will. And honestly,
But
it's exactly what they need. Because you
yeah,
want to know why? Because he's the best actor in the world, and they need somebody with gravitas. And
yeah,
I think he's gravitas.
I don't know. I'm speaking from my own, selfishness right now. I just wish I'd be more surprised, honestly.
Honestly, yeah, I agree with you. I would want a more inspired pick, but honestly, they don't have a lot of room right now.
Well,
make
you know
a
what would be
choice like that.
you know what would be really surprising, and honestly, I hope they do something like this. Not this specifically, but something like this. So we obviously saw John Krasinski as Reed Richards in Multiverse of Madness, okay?
Mhm.
And that was clearly just a way to play with the fans because there was all of that fan ploy. What if he plays Doctor Doom?
I wouldn't want him to play Doctor Doom.
Oh, I would love that idea. I would love that.
because I've seen him in a big giant property play a villain before, and he was excellent in that. So I don't need him to continue to play the villain. But
I'm saying he being John Krasinski.
I thought you were talking about Adam Driver.
No, I'm talking about John Krasinski. What if John
Krasinski
Krasinski
as
plays
Doom?
Doctor Doom?
Okay,
Like,
I kind
just-
of like that because that's an inspired, chaotic choice. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's what I'm
I
talking
thought you were
about.
talking about Adam Driver playing.
No, I'm not talking about it. I'm
um,
talking about John Krasinski, like kind of reversing the whole
I like
expectation there.
I like that. I like that a lot. Because then also too, well, one, that'll still piss off people because people
Exactly.
easily piss them off, but also like I think he could pull it off. I really do. Like,
Oh,
I think
sure.
he-
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
would be good. Yeah. No. Obviously we just fixed the MCU. Is what we just
We got nowhere. That's the
Honestly, we didn't. But you know what, Brendan? I will say this, and then we can move on. Is that
Mhm.
I think that I do root for them to try to figure it out, even though I sound like a big negative Nancy. I want them to figure it out because
Yeah.
these are big movies that a lot of people really do love, and it is frustrating because like we don't really have a way to find out why they are struggling. But I will say their struggle seems to be the gang of a lot of other things because a lot of other films seem to be doing really well. Like you're talking about John Wick, and you talk about Creed and the Creed franchise doing really well this year, and a lot of Evil Dead just crossed $100 million domestically, and there's been a lot of good success stories.
Those budgets are slightly different though, so there are some comparisons.
Well, yeah, I mean, John Wick's budget's a pretty big budget, and
that one's a pretty big one.
I don't know what the budget on Creed 3 is, but I assume it's bigger than the last two. You know what I mean? But still,
yeah, but it's not Marvel property budgetary.
No, it's still a risk to take though on like a movie without Rocky. That's pretty
True.
big. You know what I mean?
True.
First real actual Creed movie without Rocky. But you look at just where things are going this summer, and there's a lot of big movies, and a lot of those movies we all kind of pegged Guardians to be in the top 3, top 4, and it could still very much do that domestically.
Yeah.
And even worldwide, but it is kind of a shock that Marvel might potentially not be in the top 5 for the summer box office. And that's kind of crazy. You know what I mean? And it's not something I would have had on my bingo card.
That will mean they need to take a hard look at what is working and what's not, and what corrections need to be made.
Yeah. Also, too, I think in terms of marketing, Brendan, you might be right a little bit about Guardians 3 because it is kind of a dark movie. So to take kids to that would, But again,
that is not for kids. Like there are things in that movie.
But then again, I would also say Infinity War and Endgame at times are definitely not for kids, and those are the highest grossing movies ever. So you know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
What do I know?
It depends on what you choose to show. Yeah, I think Guardians Volume 3 is a little bit more visceral and hard for.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
The first hour Endgame's like everybody's dead. How do I?
It's more topically devastating as opposed to what is visually devastating. And from a kid's standpoint, what they see in front of them, what they take at face value, is sometimes more devastating, right? Which is why I think Guardians Volume 3 would be harder for a child to stomach as opposed to Endgame.
And the same thing goes a little bit with like Wakanda Forever. Like I said, like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie starts with like the literal death of T'Challa, and then a funeral. So it's a pretty somber film. You know, I mean, these are two pretty somber films. I think, while I think Guardians is, obviously a lot more fun than we're giving it credit for. There's a lot of animal cruelty in that movie. There's a lot of other stuff. So, anyway, top 10 Marvel properties. Top 10 MCU properties, I guess is a better way to say this.
Yeah. We'll focus on MCU, because when you say Marvel, I mean, of course, my first thing is that, I'm including Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 somewhere in here, and we're not doing that. We're talking about MCU specifically.
1. Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah.
I would include Spider-Man 1 as well, because that's a good movie.
I love that movie a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So MCU, there's like 30, 40, we established like 40 something different titles, entities.
41, 42, including movies and Disney Plus properties and holiday specials and other specials and things like that. So I'm trying to think, what's the best way to go about this? Do we each just reveal what our current top 10 is? Do we want to go in a certain order? How did you feel about this?
I say we go 10 to 1. I say we go 10 to 1. We don't.
You want to go back and forth? I think for the sake of time, maybe we each just like give our respective top 10s and kind of maybe.
Yeah, I think we go to 10, and then you go to 10, and then I'll go to 9, and you go to 9, or you go first, Brendan, obviously. But we don't have to go really too in depthly into it, and we can see what our crossover is and kind of discuss the list over in general. So, what's your 10?
My 10 is Loki. The show Loki is my number 10.
Okay. All right.
I think of all the Disney Plus properties, it's the one that was the most cinematic, had the most interesting ideas, and actually was the one that was bold enough to be a bit creative. So I have that one at number 10.
My number 10 is really hard, because I think I've been going back and forth as we discussed. Listen, if I'm gonna watch one of them, I guess I could say, if I'm gonna watch one of them, then my number 10 will be my number 10 will be Thor Ragnarok. And
okay.
And the reason why I would say that is because like Taika Waititi has really grained on me a lot over the last couple of years, but that movie's a lot of fun. It really also is a perfect segue into Endgame, because it like literally segues right into Endgame. It's very important in that. I laugh at a lot of that humor. Jeff Goldblum, I think Ruffalo's great in the movie. Tessa Thompson's introduction, and I do think Cate Blanchett is really good as Hela. I think she's a really good villain. There's some of the stuff that doesn't work, but again, it if I'm gonna watch one of them, you're gonna tell me, okay, it's between this, because like my 11, 12, and 13 are, my 11 is No Way Home, spoiler alert, and my 12 is Black Panther, and my 13 is Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, or Thor Ragnarok. I would probably lean towards watching Thor Ragnarok a little bit more than I would the others, so that's why I picked it.
Of the four, I'm looking at my Letterboxd list. I have 41 MCU properties ranked here total. Okay, Thor Ragnarok is in my bottom 10 of them all.
Well, that's fine. I mean, like
I think it's great when they're not on Asgard, but every time they're on Asgard, I think the movie just tanks. They're not on Asgard for a lot of that movie. They're on Asgard for a lot of that movie.
They're not on there for that much.
I think that movie is only half a Taika Waititi film. Interestingly, I actually think the Thor movies get worse with each one. Like this might be a hot take. I like the Dark World more than Ragnarok.
No, that movie's garbage.
That's not garbage. That movie's actually kind of interesting.
No, the movie's.
I have that at number 20. I have Thor the Dark World at number 20.
I have Thor the Dark World at number 39, where it belongs.
I think the worst one of all of these is Iron Man 2. I'll just reveal that right now.
That is 38. So
It's
it's
not
real
great.
close.
It's not
really close.
great.
It's that movie's. God, you know what's really sad is like Sam Rockwell's in that movie and he's the villain, and I got nothing.
So is
for that
Mickey
guy.
Rourke.
God, right off the Wrestler. God, what a time! What a time! To
What
be
a
alive.
wasted opportunity.
Such a waste.
Especially because, I'm sure given I know what some of these movies are that you love, Ryan. We'll
Mhm.
talk about that first Iron Man in a little bit and why Iron Man 2 was such a wasted opportunity.
For sure.
Okay, so we got to our number 10s. My number 9 right now is Eternals. I have
Okay.
Eternals pretty high there. And again, it's hard to say it's a great movie, but I think it mostly works better because of what it's being compared to in Phase 4, and that it felt like it was a more unique and humanized vision when compared to some of these others. So I kind of give it
a
credit
vision, you say?
for a vision. Yeah, yeah. A Paul Bettany. It has a Paul Bettany to it.
It has a Paul Bettany. Okay.
But no, I really like Eternals. I think it's I think it's an underappreciated film.
All right. Okay. My number 9 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Oh,
the
you have
latest
okay.
film, yeah.
Okay.
Now, granted, a lot of these movies, like towards the 5 through 10 range, are like still 3.5 out of 5. There's a lot of 3.5 out of 5.
That's the thing. It's like, I'm looking at all of these. We complain about Marvel a lot, but the majority of
consistent.
these I
They're
don't
just-
dislike.
They're just 3.5 or 3 stars. Like,
Yeah,
a lot of them
yeah.
are like, yeah, it's fine. You know what I mean? Or, oh, that was
Yeah.
fun. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Overall, does it work? I've just been thinking a lot about Guardians Volume 3 over the last couple of days. I really want to see it again.
Mhm.
A movie that it does feel like a finality, a sort of closing of a book for obviously for James Gunn and these characters, these actors. It's I know that Brendan and I talked about it in our review. The Rocket stuff really emotionally got me. Some of the Peter Quill stuff definitely got me as well. I think the cast is really, really good here overall.
Sure.
It's give or take a couple of different things, and it's definitely of like some of the films that have come out recently. It's one of the few I would want to post in game want to return to and rewatch. So Guardians Volume 3.
No, I'll be willing to give it a second go to see if I like it even more. But
You made me cry. It kind of hurts too. I mean, it kind of helps
well,
it too.
honestly, that means the movie's working if it's able to affect you that way. And there were elements of it that did make me tear up a little bit. So maybe I should give it more credit. But yeah, we do have a full review of that one on the InSession Film website, on YouTube, all of the platforms that you can follow us on. So if you want to hear Ryan and I go even more in depth on what we thought about Volume 3 there, you can listen to that. Talking Marvel. Number 8, I know we'll disagree on because, and in fact, I even know my friend JD Duran on the show here will probably disagree with me on this. I have this one way lower than he would like to see, and I know I have it way higher than you would like to see. But my number 8 is Captain America: Civil War. Again, Avengers 1.5, if you want to call it that.
2.5.
2.5. Actually, 2.5. I'm forgetting about another Avengers film that I might talk about later.
It's okay. We can forget about that one too. It's
we'll see about that. We'll see about that. But yeah, I like Captain America: Civil War quite a bit. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk that you might want to say about the Russo brothers specifically, and we can get the gray mans out of the way and the cherries out of the way. But I like the way, from a script writing standpoint, I like the way that they're able to balance character in Civil War. I think the banter is good, and I like that there at least is an attempt at nuance between two character perspectives there that have their own valid points of view. And that's that word there, nuance, is not something I often say with regard to the MCU. So, and I think Civil War does it pretty well. There's a good sense of balance that I think is really well done. So I like Civil War. I think it's a very good film.
Yeah.
I know you don't agree. I know you don't agree.
It's okay. I think it's, of the Russo brothers Marvel products, it's definitely the lesser for me. And
okay.
and,
Well, I know which one that they directed that you love that I don't. So we might talk about that later.
Well, there you go. My number 8 is one you already mentioned, Loki. That's my only television product here.
Okay.
I think that fundamentally it's just the best show. It's funny. It's kind of got the perfect balance of the sort of multiverse stuff that they've been doing. I think Owen Wilson's chemistry alongside Tom Hiddleston's fantastic. You
Agreed.
add in Gugu Mbatha-Raw and Sophie de Martineau, I believe, as Selvi, who's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it introduced the guy that we didn't really talk about it, but soon that they will be replacing Kang with a different actor, I believe. That'll be probably a bold prediction I can say here towards the end. But it's also a really good contained story, and of all the properties on television so far, this is the only one that the MCU has delivered where I actually went, I want to see a second season. I want to see more of where that story goes, because it kind of lends itself with its cliffhanger ending to be like that. It reminded me a little bit at times of a show I really like. It reminded me a little like Leftover vibes at times too, and some of the Lindelof qualities that I find on television that I lend myself over to. So,
Okay.
I had a good time with Low Key season 1.
It's low key a good
Low
show.
Key, the best TV show that they've ever done. So
Yeah. Yeah.
number 7.
Number 7. My number 7 is an Avengers film. And it's my favorite film with the word Avengers in its title. And it's the only Avengers film I have in my top 10. It's Age of Ultron.
Oh, I knew this was coming.
Yeah, I know I'm in the
Sense it
minority
in
on
the,
this one.
I could sense it in
I
the
like
force.
this movie so much. I like it so much. And I think it's because it actually takes time to let these characters talk as people as opposed to being superheroes. And I love the first Avengers. Don't get me wrong. Even Endgame, I like that as well. But those movies were built on the team dynamic getting together to fight a certain cause, right? Whereas Age of Ultron is more concerned with things like, what does it mean to lift Thor's hammer and get drunk while doing it?
For like
now,
90 seconds.
And well, I mean, it's maybe I'm giving the film more credit because of a scene like that for as short as it is. But I mean, if you were to ask me straight up right away, and I'd like no time to think about this, what is the best scene in the entire MCU? I would say it's the lifting of Thor's hammer. It's because each character has their own psychological moment that defines who they are. You have Bruce Banner, who tries to turn it into a joke because of his insecurities.
Mm-hmm.
You have Tony Stark, who's trying to use technology to lift it. You have Natasha, Black Widow, who refuses to even try because of her own inner demons. You have Hawkeye, who chooses to turn it into a bit of a... He's the realist. He looks at it as that there is some type of magical trickery to it. Each thing there is all about character building, from an internal standpoint. And I think the movie is all about that. It might not always flow very well as a movie, but it at least has an attempt at doing something different on its mind that I give it credit for. So, Age of Ultron, I think, is pretty underrated.
It's number 27 on my list.
Okay.
So it's
too low.
Don't
worry. There's gonna be more on my top 10 here that I think are even lower than that on your list.
Yeah, well, no one's perfect.
No one's perfect.
Myself.
Some do like it hot.
But I will say one up at the top here, in my number 7, and I'm actually shocked because Brendan's always saying he is the quote unquote stan here at InSession Film for this movie. Well, I'm taking the mantle because my number 7 is The Eternals. And
good man.
And a movie that when I was watching, I was just kind of like Brendan. I was like, why is everybody getting so mad? This movie's kind of good. And then as I kept watching, I was like, no, this movie's good. The fact that they haven't addressed the floating thing into the earth means that Chloe Zhao kind of just destroyed Marvel. And so she won not only an Oscar that year, she kind of destroyed Marvel in the same platform because they've never talked about it since. I think that it's really interesting. It's very complex. It's kind of bold, and I wish the MCU would do it a little bit more and have more questions that and sort of question itself and have its characters question itself more than what you mentioned there with Age of Ultron. That's very fair and valid. And
Yeah.
some of the things that I like about that movie, just overall, like it's, it doesn't click 100% for me in that movie.
Okay, that's fair.
I will say that, I do kind of tend to lean more towards Age of Ultron than I do Joss Whedon's other one. So, which is,
Okay.
as I'm saying that, I'm moving them around a little bit because I do think I do think the first Avengers is like it's a good movie for what it was, but like I don't think
It was an event movie, and it's a very good event movie. And
it's
that's
good
not
for
to knock it. That's not to knock
No.
it, but
but like in that year
yeah.
it was fine, but it's not really like
I
more of
think
the
there are
Avengers
more-
movies have said more things, and
There
other
there
films
are
have said
more
more things.
there are more complicated ideas in Age of Ultron that I've discovered on rewatch. That movie is more of a grower than maybe the first
Yeah.
Avengers is.
And I think Eternals is kind of like that for me, and it kind of
Yeah,
just
it is.
it's one that I kind of hold to myself a little bit and be like, no, this one's mine. Like you guys can screw off. This one's mine. Like it's also aesthetically, I think it's really interesting too. And I think Zhao's sensitivities, like it's very, you can feel her in it, and I think that's a good thing. A lot of these things too, it's like you can feel their directors in it, and those are the ones I think that are the most successful. So
Yeah. I agree.
Eternals.
I agree. All right, number 6.
Number
We on
6.
number 6.
Yeah.
I guess I'll say very little about this one because I know you're not going to agree with this. My number 6 is Captain Marvel.
I mean, I don't dislike that movie. I think it's
I thought you
fine.
did. Maybe Jay's the one that really dislikes
I think
this
it's Jay that does not like Captain Marvel. I mean, I have it at 25, but I also am like, I don't dislike that movie. I think it's fun. Like it's, like I'm more interested in the Marvels that are coming out this year because of that in Miss Marvel. Like I'm interested in it. And also when Brie Larson was in that trailer, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Captain Marvel. I like Captain Marvel.
I do like her in Captain Marvel. I think the thing I love the most about that movie is that it really does take advantage of its 90s aesthetic. And even from a visual standpoint, I think it's one of the more interesting looking and choreographed MCU movies. And maybe a lot of that is also just the de-aging of Samuel L. Jackson in that movie is actually pretty effective. And there is also some complicated ideas with the character of what's his name, Telos, played by Ben Mendelsohn. The sleight of hand there I think is pretty interesting. Now, granted, the actual villain in that movie, played by Jude Law, is what it is. That's fine, but there at least is this almost like indie film spirit to it, which maybe is Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden bringing their sensitivities to it, which I did feel. I did feel that it's one of those movies in the MCU that I feel like the directors who came from a very specific indie film background were kind of able to imbue their sensibilities into it that felt more noticed than others. So I admire that about Captain Marvel, and I think because of that, it's held up pretty well. I think it's a very enjoyable film. Not to say that I think people are wrong for thinking it's lesser, but I actually think it's very good. I really like that one.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was on TNT, because I mean, all these Marvel movies are on TNT all the time.
True.
And I watched like 20 minutes of it before, and I thought it was really good. And I thought Larson had really great chemistry with Samuel L. Jackson.
Agreed.
Who was really good in the movie too. Yeah.
It was kind of like what were people comparing it to? The Long Kiss Goodnight or something like that.
That's what it
did have some of those vibes.
Movie.
Yeah, for sure.
That movie's better, obviously, but
I mean, that's a product of its time. It makes it more charming nowadays, right?
Exactly. Yeah. My number 6 is the granddaddy of them all. It's Avengers Endgame. It's a movie.
Okay.
That, I mean, the money speaks for itself. No, I'm just kidding.
The money, it made money. That means it's good.
Made money. James Cameron just went like Avengers $. But no, I think that's, while it's not nearly perfect sort of ending to it, I think that the first hour and the second hour of this 3 hours are epic, are fantastic. Like, I think that like the first hour, I love it because we're stuck in this dread, and All the characters are really kind of separated and questioning themselves and whatnot, and they slowly obviously come back together. And I think the time travel stuff's is what always has gotten me, and it's a little wonky and everything, but you kind of
Yeah.
you accept it to get to, I think, that end.
There is a level of nostalgia to it that is kind of charming,
Yeah.
though.
And then there's good banter, and also what I like, the one thing I do like about it is incorporating the history of these movies, incorporating a bad movie like Thor: The Dark World into it, and making it like, oh, okay, that wasn't a waste of my 2 hours. That would actually like make sense now and everything, and like it's part of all of this, and using those past films to sort of to weave in and to have the stones and whatnot, and then I think the last hour, which is just the biggest nerd fest blockbuster popcorn thing we've had in a long time. I think it's great, and I think it's got a lot of, and we sometimes fan service is genuinely spoken as a bad thing, but when it's done right, I think it can be very effective and a lot of fun. And I had a lot of fun with it, like, and it was kind of what I wanted, and that in the other film that I'll talk about here in a minute, like that was kind of like, I was like, finally, I've been waiting years for this, and I was getting annoyed I had to kept waiting for this, and then it lived up to its bill. And so Endgame.
And it at least tried to surprise people, right? Which I appreciated too.
I mean, we kind of knew some of the things, but it's one thing to know it in your kind of like in your gut. It's another thing to then see it and emotionally execute things, and
and even though it you're right. And even though it crystallizes in a way that maybe most people expected, at least it felt like an emotional payoff that was kind of earned.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is what matters. I have this as my number 11, so it just missed my top 10 for the purposes of this conversation, but I do think it is very good.
Yeah. So fives. Let's do our
fives. My number 5 is a movie I used to hate. In fact, that's kind of a common theme for at least 2 of the films in my top 5. But my number 5 is Iron Man 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a film that I used to say a good Shane Black movie, but a bad MCU movie. But as we've kind of watched these films progress, or I guess for some people, as we watch these films regress, it kind of makes you appreciate the vibes that a movie like Iron Man 3 gives off, and how inconsequential and daring that it is, and the fact that it was trying to subvert your expectations. And at the same time, it's a very quirky and well-written movie. In fact, to call it Iron Man 3 is kind of a disservice. It actually feels more like Tony Stark, the movie, as opposed to Iron Man, because he spends like 90% of the movie outside of the suit. It's really more about his technology and how he's able to manipulate the Iron Man tech for his own needs, even if he's not taking part in it. And that's kind of the inner battle, right? Like there is a sense of doubt that he has to contend with, whether or not he's even heroic in those endeavors, because he's able to use technology to do all of these things for him. And that's kind of an overarching theme with the movie, which I think is pretty interesting. I think Iron Man 3 is one of those Marvel movies that has aged favorably in the grand scheme of the MCU. And it also has a killer score. I think the score by, I think it's Brian Tyler, who is not one of my favorite composers, who has worked with whether it be Marvel or any other property. But some of his tracks for this film, especially during the end credits, I think absolutely rock. So I think this is a good one. I think it's aged pretty well.
It's lower on mine, but it's one like I haven't seen in a long time, and it's low. But I think it definitely a rewatch could maybe it'll lift it up. I don't know.
I'd be curious to hear how it holds up for you, if it does at all.
I don't know when I'll rewatch it, because I've got so many other things to watch. I really do. You know what? I've been thinking about. Here's one complaint, mid complaint here, and then we can continue, Brendan.
Yeah.
When I have a child one of these days, I'm gonna have to sit down probably and show them all these. I think that the thing about Feige is like, dude, you gotta stop, because like I'm gonna have to watch like 50 films with my kid, and they're not going to be some of the greatest movies of all time. They're going to be just the MCU alone. You know what I mean? Like, time's limited on this planet is what I'm saying, folks. So
Yeah, I mean, you got to be too busy showing.
showing.
You got to show your kid. If you have a choice between Iron Man 3 and My Neighbor Totoro, I think.
I mean, if it's between Thor: Love and Thunder or Kiki's Delivery Service, which one do you think I'm picking? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you're picking Showgirls, but I mean,
that is very true. Young. My number 5 is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I
okay.
love this movie. I think it's so much fun, and Simu Liu is a star, and like dude's great. Aquafina's great. I mean, obviously Michelle Yeoh and having Benedict Wong, but I mean, and having Ben Kingsley come back and it is sort of comedy, and it's one of the things that like maybe makes me want to go back and watch Iron Man 3 because he's so good in this one. But
Yeah,
then
he's great.
But then obviously, Brendan, the thing that makes Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings so great is Tony Leung. He's fantastic in this movie. And there's different directorial flares and decisions in the action. I think that Dustin Daniel Cretton does in this film is actually really good. And there's one scene in particular that's easily a top 5 Marvel scene for me, which it's when Shang-Chi is young and his father goes to his father takes him to this like, I guess it's like this crime boss sort of place, and there's this shot of like beating him up through a mirror, and it obviously is very evocative of Wong Kar-wai and the films that Tony Leung has been known for throughout his career and everything. I think the movie's really great. I mean, I do think a little bit of the final climactic battle sequence is what kind of drags it down a little bit, but I think of the family dynamic and the surprise nature of this film too, because I remember seeing the trailer for it and thinking, man, this movie's gonna just be like, no, this is like straight to DVD kind of stuff. And then I watched the film and it completely was different. Had me laughing. There's a gag involving or a joke involving the Eagles Hotel California. That's truly one of the funniest things in the MCU.
That's pretty good. It's pretty
best
good.
One of probably the best needle drops outside of just like a Guardians film. So yeah, it's a fun movie, and that's why I want a sequel, because it's like, dude is really good. I'm like, let's have more, please. So
I have this at number 17 right now. So I like it quite a bit. I think as far as origin stories go, it definitely gave me a sense of excitement that I hadn't felt in a while. And it really does a good job, lingering on long camera movements for the for the choreography and the fight sequences, which I really did appreciate. And as much as the final battle is the typical final battle isms that you get with a Marvel movie, at least some of the visuals that they presented were at least kind of inventive.
Yeah.
Even if they weren't well, rendered, but the ideas there were pretty, at least interesting.
And the emotionality surrounding it too, between
well, a lot of that is Tony Leung, who is just he's just fantastic.
Yeah, he's God. I mean, is he available? I'm very, I would go.
I'd like to shake his hand.
Okay, that's being nice about what I'd do to them. He's a god. Number 4.
Number four, I have Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
All right.
Which I know
let's
is
talk about it right now together. That's my number 2. So
okay, well then we can just save some time here. I feel like this was phase 2 if I'm not mistaken, but I feel like there were 2 movies that were major turning points for Marvel in general, not just phase 2, but for Marvel. One of them was Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and the other one was Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
The first Guardians.
Yeah.
But Winter Soldier, I think this is the one that did, a lot of these Marvel movies have this, I don't want to use the word agenda, right? But they have like this narrative behind them, supporting them to say like, oh, like Ant-Man, for instance, is a heist movie first, or this other one's, something like they have these like things supporting them. Whereas the Winter Soldier kind of tried to market itself as a political thriller, but I think it's the one that really actually earned that. I think it actually did a pretty good job trying to tap into the whole like Snowden paranoia era. And a lot of that was also due to Robert Redford as the villain of Alexander Pierce. I think he's a very compelling presence. So there is a slight topicality to the film that I think kind of helps, but also, we'll talk about the Russo brothers, who are probably the most debatable filmmakers in the MCU, right? I like a lot of what they do in this movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, this is their first time working in the MCU. So maybe there was a new, fresh eye that they were able to bring to it. From an action sequence standpoint, from a fight choreography standpoint, there are actually some pretty visceral moments. And a lot of that is also due to the sound editing and mixing. So I think it is a very compelling film that the MCU kind of needed. Now, it's certainly the MCU has kind of used that as a blueprint going forward and kind of, manufactured it. But this time it felt very visceral for the first time. And I think it does a good job with it.
Yeah, it's my number 2. It's one of 2 films in the MCU only that have a 4.5 out of 5 star ratings for me, Brendan. They are easily also the most rewatchable, but also this is my number 1 to me. Also stand alone. Also too, there's not a lot of obviously there's not a lot of connective tissue that you could want to make with this in another film if you wanted to, but it's not trying to set up anything. It's just doing its own thing, and it's built off of this relationship between Steve and Bucky, and you have this sort of paranoid thriller almost in the vein of 3 Days in the Condor and those Redford films, and it's just surprising enough that Robert Redford's also the bad guy in this movie too, who's a really good effective bad guy. But it really comes down to Steve and Bucky and that relationship, and it's such a the character of Bucky Barnes in these movies have been such a heartbreaking nature, and it's really kind of really broke me that where he's kind of ended up now, post Endgame and everything, and really post this film in general. I've been kind of disappointed in it and whatnot. So I just think that there's those for this movie in particular, their fight scenes actually mean something emotional. And I think between that and Shang-Chi and the other 2 films I'm going to mention here as well, like
there's a propulsion to it.
There's a propulsion. There's connective tissue. There's emotion. There's energy attached. That it's not just a random bad guy fighting our hero. There's more layers to this than you would expect, and I think that Evans is fantastic in this movie too. I think the introduction of Mackie into as Falcon in here as well is great. It's a really
actually
good movie.
the way that he was introduced and the way that he kept alluding to himself as a quote unquote pilot until he said I didn't say pilot, and then what his role actually serves and how that's introduced. That was like an applause driven moment in the theater. And again, that's the way it's captured from a filmmaking standpoint. There was a sense of genuine excitement there.
Yeah, they are the best at, I think, within their films, at least giving those fan service moments and allowing an audience.
They're good at timing them. They really are.
They're good at allowing you as an audience to earn them and trust that you've earned them. I think Watts, I don't know if he earns those, with No Way Home, like that, those portals, it's expected. And it's also, it's like, I don't think it, I don't credit him a lot when it comes to that stuff, but I do credit the Russos a lot here because I think that their direction is pretty solid here. And I think that their tendencies lean to lead in here with collaboration rather than domination. I think that the Gray Man is a perfect example of like, they need a Feige, they need the writers here to sort of help them
kind of rein them in a little bit,
them in. And it's okay to do that. And they're kind
That's
of
fine. Some filmmakers need that.
Yeah. And I think that they're perfect vessels here. They're not visionaries. They're collaborators, and that's okay.
That's fine.
That.
Yeah,
Because you can make a hell of a lot great movies doing that. So
Yeah.
my number 4 is Infinity War. I like the first half of that more than Endgame, because I think of it as not an Avengers movie. I think of it as a Thanos movie, and I think that movie, of all of them, just fully understand that if we're going to have a galactic, snap my finger villain character, we're going to set this up to such a way that you almost feel like you want him to take the snap, but like at the same token though too, he's not like he is a psychopath, but he's also, you understand his motives are clear. It's the first time we really get to see them lose as a collective, and I gotta say, for marketing standpoint too, shout out to Marvel for it, because there's that scene in the Infinity War trailer where all of them are running in the woods, and you think they're all going to be together, and that's not in the movie. And I remember getting faked out by that. I remember the snap itself. I was shocked because I knew that people would die, but I didn't expect it to be like that, and I didn't expect some of the deaths and decisions. I thought for sort of doing it and going that way, they earned a lot of it, and I think that it is dark at times, and I think that it's part of a two-parter that I really kind of I respect. And there's also got great moments like where Captain America re-shows up, and you get that score that churns up there at the subway system, or you get the or you get the great scene where Thor comes out and the battlefield and stuff like that.
That's a good scene. That's a good scene.
There's a lot of good stuff there, but to me, honestly, it's the shocking nature of being in that theater. And if there's one time I will say that I had a theater experience with all these movies, it was when the snap happened. And I was at a draft house, and you can't talk at a draft house, Brendan, but
No.
people were gasping. Some people were crying. It was a very emotional, and because it was so shocking at the people that were gone. And now obviously we knew that they were back and everything, but to see it still is one thing. And I thought the Russos did a good job at building up tension. I mean, like that Spider-Man scene alone, where he's where he's being snapped in. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. That is like, it's terrifying. It's almost a horror film at that point, and so commend the Russos for that, at least.
When I saw this in the theater, it was a pretty packed house, and it had some similar reactions that you're talking about. There was one young girl behind me, in the row behind me at least, who, and I'm not even kidding, she had a full-on panic attack because of what happened. Like the paramedics actually had to be called, and because she kept saying,
"Sorry,
they're dead." They're dead.
Yeah.
And I guess that goes to show the power of the ending, which is one of my favorite things about it. In the ranking here of what I said, I had 41 properties here in total. I have Infinity War at number 34.
Gee, okay.
And it's, again, we talked about how it's primarily a Thanos movie. I wish I felt that more.
Maybe a rewatch.
The problem I have with this movie is that it just feels like I'm a pinball throughout this machine going through so many different directions. It's just, I think as a narrative, it's a jumbled mess. It doesn't flow well for me. Like even when you mentioned the whole like reintroduction of Steve Rogers in that great score, I think that's very anticlimactic. That never worked for me. But Thor's reintroduction on Wakanda there is amazing because he had his own mini short film to justify that. That's the thing. This movie feels like a series of mini short films as opposed to a movie. And just structurally, I've always found it kind of frustrating, even if I like what it's going for. But yeah, I know a lot of people would disagree with me on that. JD, for instance, I think also has it in his top 5, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So he would agree with you there.
It's a movie that I think every single action, every single decision, every single thing that all those characters do, whether it's in fear, whether it's an act of revenge, whether it's in tactical or whatnot, it is preparing for Thanos. It is a Thanos movie pure from the beginning. And he may not even be there, but it's a presence thing. He looms throughout that entire runtime, and every decision is because of him. And I think that it's from that opening, you understand this is not going to be a typical MCU movie, especially at the time. I know we've seen them differently now, but at the time, and this is only like 5 years ago, but when this movie was coming out, and they we'd pretty been safe, I think, at this point. I think this movie started to be like, no, we're gonna do some things in here, and and I wish they would have held true to a lot of them, to be honest, Brendan, but given where it's at, I think that they make you understand the totality of this madman.
It's one of those it's one of those things I just wish it functioned better as a movie, if that makes sense.
That's fair.
And that's my thing.
But also too, the Thor stuff in here is incredible. Like,
it's incredible. Yeah, it's honestly it's better than anything in Thor Ragnarok. I'll say that.
Yeah, and again, I think the Doctor Strange is great. I think the Spider-Man and Iron Man stuff.
See, that's the stuff I don't like. I don't love because that dynamic is so distinct that whenever they're on screen talking, I forget that Thanos is even in this movie. It just has it has such a comedic energy that it takes me out of it.
No, yeah, I mean that's sort of the danger of the MCU, right? It's like for every sense of sincerity, there's 10 jokes slapped onto it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the stuff that actually does kind of detach me a little bit is the Guardian stuff. You know what I mean?
I'm kind of with you. Like in a vacuum, the whole who is Gamora?
Yeah, like that's
I like that in a vacuum, but in the context of Infinity War as a whole, I do think it's kind of distracting.
But the Wakanda stuff is great too. Like all
that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, it does end on a high note. So I will give it that.
Yeah.
So that was your number 4. Yeah. So our number 3. My number 3 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
It's my number 3.
All right, perfect. Let's talk about it. And we're running low on time. We got to be pretty quick about these.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we sort of talked about why we appreciate this film when we reviewed Guardians Volume 3, which is now available. But Volume 2 is a film I didn't love when I first saw, but now I think has retroactively become more emotional, more purposeful, more sincere as time has gone on, and the way it ties to I get like how you force people to be a certain expectation in your family. I think is pretty heartfelt. It's not just with regard to Peter Quill and his own father of ego, but there's a lot of these expectations that are, being forced upon individuals in this movie, and it becomes this idea of failing to those expectations. So the film is really about failure in many ways. And it's not, in many ways, it's not really a movie as far as like functioning from beginning, middle, and end. It kind of feels more like a vibe. And I love that about it. So I think Volume 2, Guardians Volume 2 specifically, has aged significantly well in comparison to the rest of the MCU as time has gone on.
It's a good vibe movie, great soundtrack.
I think it's the best soundtrack of the Guardians movies.
It's the best soundtrack of the MCU period, obviously.
Well, it's the one where it's the one where the soundtrack I felt like had the most thematic tie-ins.
Yep.
When you hear The Chain by Fleetwood Mac in that moment, that is a literal fist in the air moment there.
I mean, like Mr. Blue Sky being used as Groot is dancing around while they're fighting that.
That is the best opening credits of any Marvel movie.
So good. I mean, obviously, anytime you play father and son in a movie, you're going to probably get JD to cry, but you're definitely going to get me to cry. The line of Yondu, he may have been your father, but he wasn't your daddy.
Yeah.
That is a line that is a top 5 line.
It's also one of the best scores of the MCU.
Yeah,
was
so
Tyler Bates
good.
and his score there? That he went hard on that movie. It's a beautiful form of musicality.
It's really great. And then I mean, yeah, I just think that there's the Gonzo sort of gag, like when Yondu and Rocket are locked up and Baby Groot's got to go and get them the key or whatever, and he brings back like a toe or something. It's like it's just
it's so
stuff,
wacky. Yeah,
it's
I love
so
it.
wacky. It's so much fun. Kurt Russell just great in the film too. Introduction of Mantis. It's a great movie. I love it. Yeah,
I love it a lot.
My favorite Guardians as well too. So
yeah, and one of the more inventive looking movies in the MCU as well.
Absolutely. My number 2 was was Captain America: The Winter Soldier. We already talked about that. So Brendan, your number 2.
Iron Man, first Iron Man, and I feel like we should talk about it together because I feel like you're gonna have more thoughts on this one
Yeah,
too.
it's my number one. Yeah, it's my number one, buddy.
It was almost my number one. I almost shared your opinion on this one, and it's not just because it was the first, but man, what an introduction! What a great introduction! And I mean, I like Jon Favreau quite a bit as a director, but I think this might be his best work. There are
Absolutely.
Can I say I'm not saying this as a form of a hot take, Ryan, but I genuinely think I like this movie more than The Dark Knight, and it came out the same year in 2008.
I'm not going that far, Brendan.
I think I like it slightly more, but then again, I mean, subjectively speaking, I sometimes like when my superhero movies have a little bit more fun, and one that actually makes me laugh a lot, like this one does. So for all of those reasons, I love this first Iron Man a lot, and I know you have more thoughts on it. So for the sake of time, I'll leave it at that. But I think the first Iron Man is wonderful, a wonderful movie.
I think that they nailed it right off from the bat. I mean, like, it's a movie that honestly, you don't have to watch the MCU. You could just watch Iron Man, and you'd have a good time with it. It's comedy. It's an action film. It's romance. It's got drama. Jeff Bridges is the bad guy. Terrence Howard, before he got kicked out, pretty good.
Actually, I liked him as Rhodey in that movie.
I liked him as Rhodey, even though I think Cheadle's done a good job. I'm never going to say anything bad about Don Cheadle. Don't ever say anything bad about
I will
Don
say
Cheadle.
this. I do prefer Don Cheadle in the role, but I mean, in the context of what this movie is doing tonally, I think Terrence
really
Howard
good.
fits this specific iteration.
Gwyneth Paltrow, really great as well.
Charming as hell. So charming.
I think your complaint about Guardians of the Galaxy, the sort of Volume 3, the rocket stuff, the Rocket Raccoon stuff in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this movie is exactly, I think, what you're asking, which is what happens to Tony Stark being in the cave, and that being sort of the beginning of our film, and how we kind of end up here, and we get a little bit of that, but we spend a lot of time in that cave to sort of establish and build.
Yeah, and it's all told sequentially, so there's at least like a form of momentum there.
Exactly, and then I think we spend so much time with him, with Downey, building this machine and getting it to learn how to fly. The flying sequences are great. The robot in his funny sequences as well. Learning about his mistakes, but then also the ending of it really good. The introduction to S.H.I.E.L.D. obviously introducing what an end credit scene should be, as opposed to what they have become now, which is more marketing ploys to get on Disney Plus, is to propel the story forward, to get you enticed for the next thing. I think Downey
is a revelation.
Downey's a movie star, and he had a fantastic year that year. That and Tropic Thunder, two great performances.
It was a comeback year for him.
It was fantastic. I mean, honestly, the one thing I do say, Brendan, all the time is that, and this isn't trying to play revisionist history, because I think the performance by Heath Ledger is absolutely fantastic. But if Heath Ledger was around, if he hadn't tragically passed away, I do wonder if Robert Downey Jr. would have had a chance to win the Oscar for Tropic Thunder, because of the comeback narrative, the momentum of this Iron Man movie mixed in with that insane performance in Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's
Possible.
such a year. We'll never know. But I don't agree with you on The Dark Knight. I love The Dark Knight.
I love it too. I mean, then again, I Batman Begins is my favorite of the trilogy, but that's
I mean, Batman Begins is great, but Dark Knight, I watched that movie I think like a month or so ago, and
I shouldn't have said anything, because I'm not trying to knock The Dark Knight. I think it's a very good movie.
No, it's
I prefer the comedic and charming stylings of Iron Man. That's just that's always been more my thing.
And I like Christopher Nolan doing his version of Heat. You know what I mean? But in the middle of
with even William Fichtner making an appearance.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, I think both movies are great. Actually, honestly, like, it's a great 2008, great year for comic book movies.
That was a really good year for summer blockbusters. It really was.
I mean, I don't know if you, I know you may disagree with this or not. I don't know your take on this, but I also really love Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy: The Golden Army.
That's
And-
in my top 3 Guillermo del Toro movies.
And I've always been really pissed that they never let him make another one. I mean,
that
obviously I know
movie
it
is
didn't make any money.
amazing.
It's a great movie. And talk about like that movie also, Brendan, having like some darker elements, but also having a lot of humor and a lot of heart to it as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
great creature designs. Like, so but yes, Iron Man for me, clearly it's like, it's really also like a star making role. Like Downey Jr. was a star, and he's an Oscar nominee, but this put him in a different stratosphere. You just believe him the minute he's on frame. He's so into it, and it's an amazing performance because it also feels effortless, and but yet that nobody else could play that role and it wouldn't work.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it was such a
Yeah.
it was such a gamble, and it paid off. And I love the ending where he's go on the cue cards, and I mean he's just like, yeah, I am Iron Man, and then the movie ends, and you're like,
That's it.
that's great,
That's it.
that's
Yeah.
great,
And you got that
So,
great Black Sabbath song finally playing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, that was
I
my
think it's
number
just
one.
my number one. Yeah, I think it's just my
This is
number
your
one that's
one,
left.
and then we're out
Yeah.
of here.
My number one's the first Captain America of all things. The
That's
first
a good
Avenger.
movie. I mean,
It's
it's
my
low
favorite
on my list,
MCU
but
movie.
I do like that movie. Yeah.
And again, I think I may have revealed my cards as to why I would like a movie like this when I talked about Iron Man. I'm just more sensitive to like the comedic, charming side of superhero movies. I mean, this movie was directed by Joe Johnston, and it's basically him doing The Rocketeer again. The film feels like it came from the 1980s, right? And I love that about it. I love the old school feel. I obviously love the charming nod to Powell and Pressburger's A Matter of Life and Death by the end. And a lot of these Marvel movies work because of the team dynamic, right? The characters at play. The team dynamic here in this movie is amazing. Like, not just between Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes, but what other characters like Dugan and Jones, Peggy Carter. Tommy Lee Jones in this movie is one of my all-time favorite supporting performances in any MCU. Yeah, I mean, he's so good in this.
This movie has the Tooch.
Yeah, pretty brief role.
Anytime you have the Tooch in a movie, Brendan, it's
Mhm.
immediately 3 stars. It's immediately 3.5 stars.
Yeah,
Tooch.
and he's great. He's great.
love the
Going back to Tommy Lee Jones, he has probably my 2 favorite lines of dialogue in any MCU movie that triggered the most laughter out of me. One of them being, "He's still skinny," and the other one being, "I'm not kissing you." Yeah. Now, granted, like from a narrative villain perspective, like I don't necessarily love Hugo Weaving as Red Skull. I think the villain is fine. He's fine.
It's Hugo Weaving being Hugo Weaving.
Yeah. I mean, he's good in the role. He's not the most complex.
German accent captain.
I mean,
it's like
and I do think he and Toby Jones at least have good banter from a villainous standpoint. But I love the look of the movie. I love the feel of the movie, and that's what really elevates it for me when compared to all these other ones. And it's just so rewatchable and so sincere. I say that word a lot. It's just so sincere. It's one of my favorite things to talk about with any movie. It has so much sincerity and heart.
Also, too, I think the ending of the movie, where I mean, obviously it flashes him and sets up for the Avengers and everything.
Yeah,
but you can still do that, Brendan. But also have a line of dialogue that breaks your heart for Steve, because when were you going somewhere or something like that? And he goes, "I had a date."
See, that's the thing. Like, anyone who says this movie ends as if it's just a setup for the Avengers, I don't buy it. Like, this movie has a clear, tragic, emotional payoff.
Yeah, it's
it's
truly sad.
Yeah, and I think most people only say that because they know we're getting an Avengers movie afterwards.
Yeah.
But if you look at this movie in a vacuum, it actually has a real like sad, tragic ending. And I think like if you were to take this movie out of the MCU and just watch it on its own terms, it's actually like it works in a vacuum as a really devastating movie.
Yeah, that's why like they call all this back to Endgame, you don't get that sort of payoff or understanding if you don't have this movie laying the foundation down
Right.
And then that ending leading like that. Yeah, it's a really to me, I think about it and it's really sad. I feel really bad for Steve and everything.
I do too. And Chris Evans, very good in the role. Perfectly cast.
Very.
We talked about Robert Downey Jr. being perfectly cast. I think this is another. I mean, pretty much everyone from Phase 1 was. I mean, maybe with the exception of Edward Norton as.
I was going to say Norton didn't, but then he got replaced, and I think that one turned out okay.
That one turned out okay.
Ruffalo's pretty good.
Unless he's, spoiling movies during the press junkets.
Listen, you know what? Let him be a human being because it's our human instinct not to lie and keep secrets. It's very hard. You know what I mean?
Hey,
so
they're
it's all
excited
good
about,
fun. It's just a movie for Christ's sake.
They're excited about what they're doing. So you know what? The fact that they love their job that much, I think that's what we need to take away.
They can joke
this.
about it. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Well, that's our MCU top 10s as we speak, as of right now.
Yeah.
And you can email us at InSessionFilm.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram just by searching InSession Film. And you can let us know what your top 10s are. Just screenshot us and hashtag MCU, hashtag InSession Film MCU. How about that for this week? Brendan, we were going to do some like predictions maybe, but I think we're running a little long on time. So why don't we just get to this week's poll results?
It's real bad. Okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll. Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
And inspired by Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 this week, Brendan, we asked on a Twitter poll today, what is your favorite version of the Guardians gang? Basically, what is your favorite volume? Like a book. Yeah. We were like, what's your favorite volume? Because like these are chapters in this quote unquote trilogy. So how did the results turn out there, Brendan?
So we actually included Volume 3 in this list as well, and primarily because we know a lot of people on Twitter who follow us have seen the movie already within our film critic circle, if you will. But yes, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, we asked which one your favorite is. The winner was, by 46%, Volume 1.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, which I know is your least favorite of the three.
Yeah, they went against me. It happens.
Here's where it gets interesting, though. At 27% was a tie between Volumes 2 and 3.
Wow, okay. All right.
Now, clearly, as we just talked about, it sounds like we're in the same boat. Volume 2 is our favorite. That would have been my vote, would have been your vote as well.
Yep.
But, it's hard to ignore the importance of Volume 1. And I can see why it would win a poll like this, because
the surprise.
We talked about that. That film alongside The Winter Soldier was sort of the it's sort of a new trendsetter for the MCU, right? And it's hard to overlook the importance of that.
I mean, the surprise nature of that first film too, being such a, I remember people, I don't know if you remember this, Brendan, that first one, people thought, oh, this is a big gamble. It's going to be too weird.
Yeah.
What are these Guardians are like CD characters in the MCU. And then it became, I think it was the highest grossing film of the year or at least one of them. So not surprised at all that it was the number one in this poll. Surprised a little bit about a tie for the sequels, but
me too. A little surprised by that, but I mean,
it just shows the strength of those two films, I guess, as well. Being
shows that it's a decent set of three films. A lot of people seem to really like all three of them.
Exactly, that is for sure. Well, that's this week's poll. Thank you all for voting. And with that, we're gonna wrap up the show.
Yeah, it's about time. It's about time, man.
Just to do a couple of plugs real quick. Women in Session, new episode. You guys can go listen to that.
Yeah,
on our platforms out there. Brendan, do you know what they were talking about this week?
The life and career of John Huston was their a great topic there. It was a panel including Kristen Battistella, Zeta Short, and Amy Thomason. So we had a 3-person panel there talking about John Huston. They had a great conversation there.
You can also either watch on YouTube or download on your favorite podcasts. Brendan and I's conversation about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. You can also do the same thing and watch Jay and I's return to the Wong Kar-wai series. We reviewed Happy Together. You can either listen to that podcast form or watch it here on YouTube. Good movie. I like that movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, Brendan.
That's a blind spot for me. You know, there are a
good
few films from Wong Kar-wai pre In the Mood for Love that I need to watch. One of them's Happy Together. Haven't seen that one yet. Haven't seen Ashes of Time yet, so that's also one I need to watch. But you know, Happy Together is one that I've heard a lot of great things about as one of Wong Kar-wai's more romantic films. And I'm looking forward to watching it at some point soon because I'm a big fan of his as a director.
To let you know, it is on HBO Max.
I know
So
they're
if
all
you-
on HBO Max,
They're
or at
all
least
on
not
HBO.
most of them. Most of them.
Most of them
Time I
are.
know is not.
Yeah, My Blueberry Nights is on. I think it's on Prime. So, but
That's
and
one
so
I have
is-
seen, and I might not rewatch that one.
That is a movie that exists, and then The Grandmaster,
Yeah.
I believe, is on that platform as well too. So.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, it's over there. Highly recommended. Really, really good movie. With that, that's going to do it for this week's show. You can like, rate, review, and subscribe here on YouTube for all of our video listeners and watchers out there. For all of our podcast listeners, and you can go to Apple, Spotify, Google's, SoundCloud, all those different places. Download this favorite podcast of yours that you've been listening to for years and years and years and years. And while you're over on iTunes, if you want to give us a 5-star review as well,
Yeah.
we'd greatly appreciate it. We love those. Our podcasts are syndicated every week at Geekcast Radio and the Land Podcast Network. You can also go to InSessionFilm.com. And if you go over there, you'll see a brand new website that JD Duran put together. And thank you,
it's
JD,
beautiful.
for the new set. It's
So
a beautiful
beautiful.
website. You can also go over there and you can find the InSession Film Store where you can get our t-shirts. We're putting some new t-shirts in there soon with some different quotes from some of your favorite things that we've done over the last 10 years and whatnot. So look out for those. There's also Patreon, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can become a patron. We get the exclusive bonus content, a bunch of stuff over there. I know that we'll probably be doing a review roundup at a certain point for that, so it'll be more of a classic sort of thing. We'll try to tie it back in here as well. Maybe we'll tie something here on the YouTube channel to Patreon as well down the road soon. You'll never know until you go to patreon.com/InSessionFilm and sign up over there. There's the InSession Film app, which you can find in all of your app stores for $1.99. You can download that. And just go follow us on all of our social media platforms. Just search for InSession Film. You'll find us. Or you can email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Brendan,
Yeah.
we're done. We did
We're
this
done.
show. Anything else
done.
you want to say before we wrap this up, my friend?
One last plug. You mentioned our review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 that you and I did. I also want to plug our other review that we did, myself and JD Duran talking about Are You There, God? It's
That's
Me,
right.
Margaret.
I forgot about that. I apologize. One of the best movies of the year and one of the best reviews that we've done this year so far.
What a good movie.
What a
movie.
great... No. Not a good movie, Brennan. It's a great movie. That thing is-
Movies. That movie is... movies, man.
Movies.
Oh, gosh. That movie was like a warm blanket. I can't wait to
I
see
really
it.
need Jay to see that movie and like it because I don't want him to be...
Well, now that he heard you say this, he might try to be the outlier.
I don't really want him to because the movie's so good. I don't it's it's like one of those things where like every year where we sit here and we try to figure out like what movies we're all gonna like.
Yeah.
I feel like this one needs to be one that we all like because I don't want to live in a
I
world
hope
where Jay
so.
doesn't like this. I really it's a really special little film. I wish honestly I know everyone is worried about the box office for Guardians, but please go see Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Still, if it's in the theater,
I know,
that
yeah.
movie's not getting talked about anymore.
It's so good.
So good. Well, with that, that's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time. MCU, baby!
I am.